Human cruelty is not confined to any one age. It has echoed across every period of our existence. In the modern chapters of history, cruelty took new shapes, punishments so gruesome, so calculated, that they scar not only their victims, but the memory of humanity itself. These were not just acts of violence, but warnings, spectacles, and weapons of control, inflicted on enemies, prisoners, and supposed criminals alike. Among the darkest of these stands the Holocaust gas chambers, where punishment became industrialized death. But before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. It's always a beautiful thing to share history with you, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on our videos. Now, let us step into one of the darkest punishments of modern history, the gas chambers. This was no isolated act of cruelty, no punishment handed down to a lone criminal. This was the cold, calculated machinery of genocide, a death process designed for efficiency, precision, and anonymity. In Nazi-occupied Europe, vast camps like Auschwitz, Treblinka, Sobibor, and Majdanek became the dark heart of a system where human life was reduced to logistics. Deportation trains arrived daily carrying men, women, and children, their fate decided in minutes at the selection ramp. Some were sent to forced labor, many directly to the showers that were anything but cleansing. The gas chambers were sealed rooms disguised to dull suspicion. Inside, victims were packed tightly, the air thick with fear and confusion. Zyklon B pellets or exhaust fumes from gas fans released their invisible poison, stripping the lungs of oxygen. Death came in minutes, but it was far from peaceful. Chaos, screams, and the pounding of fists against steel doors marked the final moments. Once silence fell, ventilation systems cleared the air, and teams were sent in to remove the bodies, searching them for valuables, shaving hair, stripping clothes, a grotesque, systematic process that revealed just how industrialized the killing had become. This was not punishment in the traditional sense, but the deliberate erasure of entire peoples carried out with bureaucratic order. The Holocaust remains one of humanity's most documented and mourned crimes, a chilling reminder that when cruelty meets organization, death can be mass-produced. Unit 731, Human Experimentation. In the frozen plains of Manchuria, during the dark years of the 1930s to 1945, Imperial Japan's Unit 731 operated a facility that would make even the most hardened war criminals recoil. Officially masked as a research center, it was, in reality, a factory of human suffering, a place where scientific ambition shed its last layer of humanity. Here, prisoners, Chinese civilians, captured soldiers, and others deemed expendable were stripped not only of their freedom, but of their very status as human beings. Under the sterile gaze of doctors and scientists, they became marutas, logs. And like logs, they were cut open, tested, discarded. Vivisections were performed without anesthesia, organs examined while the heart still beat. Subjects were deliberately infected with diseases like plague, cholera, and anthrax to track the speed and agony of death. Frostbite experiments left limbs frozen solid before being thawed in boiling water. Women were raped to study venereal disease transmission. Children were infected to watch illness unfold in the smallest bodies. The work was clinical, meticulous, and utterly devoid of conscience. The findings were logged, the results analyzed, as if the victims were merely faulty specimens in an experiment, not fathers, daughters, brothers, and mothers. When the war ended, Unit 731's horrors didn't vanish into history's shadows. Many of its members were shielded from prosecution in exchange for their research, a decision that still casts a long ethical shadow today. This chapter of history is a brutal reminder that knowledge without morality is not progress. It is a weapon, and in the wrong hands, it destroys more than it discovers. The Khmer Rouge Killing Fields. Between 1975 and 1979, Cambodia became a nation turned inward upon itself, a land where suspicion reigned, where the sound of a truck engine could mean the last ride you would ever take. Under Pol Pot's Khmer Rouge, ideology was sharpened into a blade, and that blade cut deep into the country's own flesh. The regime dreamed of a pure agrarian society, free of intellectuals, urban dwellers, and anyone suspected of disloyalty. In practice, this meant teachers, doctors, monks, even people who wore glasses. Anyone who hinted at education or dissent were marked for death. The machinery of execution was chillingly efficient. Arrests in the dead of night, prisoners bound and blindfolded, transported to remote sites already dug with mass graves. At the killing fields, death was not always loud. Bullets were costly, so machetes, clubs, hammers, and even sharpened bamboo were used. The sounds of execution were sometimes drowned out by music from loudspeakers, a grotesque soundtrack meant to mask the final cries. Victims were stripped of names and identities, reduced to numbers on a list. Starvation and disease claimed those spared the immediate blow. Forced labor camps crushed bodies under the sun, and the steady churn of death filled the soil with bone fragments that still surface after heavy rains. By the time the regime fell, an estimated 2 million Cambodians, a quarter of the population, were gone. Villages were emptied, families erased, history shattered. The killing fields are quiet now, but they are not silent. The wind moves over grass that grows from unmarked graves, and the earth itself holds the memory of a time when death was not an accident of war, but an administrative routine. From the green rice paddies of Cambodia, we move across continents and decades into the arid winds of Anatolia, where death did not always wait in a camp or field, but followed step by step along an endless road. Armenian Genocide, death marches. In the shadow of World War I, the Ottoman Empire turned its gaze inward, marking its Armenian population as an enemy from within. What began as arrests and executions of intellectuals soon spiraled into a machinery of destruction, not bound by walls or confined to prisons, but stretched out across the landscape. The relocation order sounded administrative, almost mundane. In truth, they were death sentences. Entire villages were herded from their homes, stripped of possessions, and set on foot toward the Syrian desert. The roads became rivers of human misery, mothers clutching infants, elders stumbling, children falling behind. The sun was merciless. Water was scarce by design, food almost non-existent. Ottoman guards and irregular bands preyed on the columns, stealing, assaulting, killing. Disease spread through the marches like a second executioner, felling those whom thirst had already weakened. Those who could not continue were left where they fell, the dust covering them in a final indifferent shroud. The end point, if there was one, was often worse. Survivors staggered into barren desert camps where starvation and exposure finished what the march had begun. By 1917, over 1 million Armenians had been killed, not only by the blade or the bullet, but by the long, deliberate geography of death. Today, the roads remain, but their travelers are gone. The silence of the deserts hides the echoes of countless footsteps, a march where survival was not a matter of strength, but of impossible luck. From the deserts of Anatolia, where death marched under the scorching sun, we move eastward into a city whose walls could not keep out the darkness. Here, the end did not come as a slow starvation. It came swiftly, with gunfire, blades, and the screams of the defenseless. Nanking Massacre. Atrocities, December 1937. The Imperial Japanese Army breached the gates of Nanking, the capital of China's nationalist government. The city had fallen, but the nightmare had only begun. What followed in the 6 weeks after was not simply a military occupation. It was the unshackling of cruelty on an industrial scale. Tens of thousands of Chinese in precision. Bodies piled faster than they could be buried. The Yangtze River ran heavy with the dead, but the killing was only part of the horror. Civilians, men, women, and children, were dragged from their homes. The accounts speak of mass rapes, some committed before entire families, others followed by execution to erase witnesses. Pregnant women were not spared. Infants were killed in the arms of their mothers. Foreigners who remained in the city formed a small safety zone, saving thousands, but even their presence could not stem the tide. Survivors described the nights as filled with unending screams, the air thick with smoke and the smell of blood. By the time the Japanese army moved on, the population of Nanking had been reduced by hundreds of thousands. What remained was a city hollowed out, haunted by atrocities so vast that even decades later, the testimonies retain their raw, shattering force. From the chaos of war and